Putin tried the same tactic again. He sent his drones toward Ukraine, but this time, one of them missed its target. It didn't land in Ukraine. It landed in a NATO country. The Kremlin has presented incidents like this every single time as an unintended side effect of war. But Romania didn't accept that explanation because this side effect wasn't happening for the first time. It was the 28th time. Bucharest's patience ran out. Its response was not limited to a diplomatic note of condemnation. It came without delay, and it came hard. Behind Bucharest's severity lies a story most people don't know. NATO's redlines the military power Romania has been quietly building, and Europe's shifting security architecture. To understand that transformation, we first need to go back to that night, because you can only grasp the severity of Romania's response when you see the scale of the attack. On the night of May 29th, Russia launched a 43 drone attack wave against southern Ukraine. The target was the port of Ismail on the Danube River, directly across from the Romanian border. Most of the drones were intercepted by Ukrainian air defenses. But one of them, a Geran 2, Russia's copy of the Iranian-designed Shahad drone, deviated from its course and entered Romanian airspace. Romanian radars were tracking the drone. 2 F-16 fighter jets and an IAR-330 SO-CAT military helicopter were scrambled. Pilots were authorized to engage and shoot down the target, but the drone was flying at low altitude, just a few hundred meters above ground, and it remained in Romanian airspace for only 4 minutes, covering approximately 10 kilometers, according to the Defense Ministry's statement. Time was extremely limited, and firing on the drone over a populated area would have created civilian risk. The F-16s were airborne and authorization had been given, but there was physically no engagement window. The pilots had not yet reached engagement range when the drone struck. The same night, in the Maramureș region in Romania's northwest, hundreds of kilometers from Galati, another large unmanned aerial vehicle without an explosive payload, and the drone that fell on Galati was not the only one. In other words, the drone that entered Romania from the 43 drone swarm was not just one. Romania's defense ministry officially confirmed that both drones were Russian-made. This was the 28th time Russia had violated Romanian airspace since 2022, but it was the first time an explosive-laden drone had directly struck a civilian structure. The first and harshest move was directed at Russia's presence in Romania. President Nicușor summoned the Supreme Council of National Defense (CSAT) to an emergency meeting, and after the meeting stepped before the press to announce a series of decisions. Russian Consul General in Constanța, Andrei Kosulin, was declared persona non grata, and the Constanța Consulate will be closed. This decision was not random. Constanța is not just Romania's largest port, it hosts the largest NATO naval base on the Black Sea, serves as a transit point for military and civilian materials going to Ukraine, and is just an hour's distance from Europe's largest NATO base, Mihail Koganalnisianu, and the Devaselu missile shield. Former US Army Europe Commander General Ben Hodges had openly said that Constanța would be the first target if Russia attacked NATO. This consulate was known to have served for years as a function for monitoring NATO naval movements, port traffic, and shipments to Ukraine in the Black Sea. Romanian intelligence had requested the expulsion of 2 Russian diplomats in Bucharest just a year earlier, on grounds of gathering information in strategic sectors. The closure of the Constanța Consulate blinds Russia's eye on NATO operations in the Black Sea.
Constanța a fost declarat persoană non grata și Consulatul General al Rusiei, al Federației Ruse, la Constanța.
At the same time, the Russian ambassador in Bucharest was summoned to the Foreign Ministry to deliver an official protest, and CSAT proposed additional sanctions on Russian diplomatic personnel in Bucharest. In a single night, Russia's diplomatic presence in Romania was effectively pruned, and this pruning was not just symbolic, but an operational loss. President Dan put the message clearly in his press statement.
Rusă, Geran 2, plecată din Rusia, cunoaștem traiectoria, cunoaștem pe unde a trecut prin Ucraina, cunoaștem pe unde a intrat în România, parte dintr-un roi de 43 de drone rusești, din care doar una a ajuns pe teritoriul.
Romania had definitively determined the drone's source, route, and ownership. There was no room left for Kremlin denial. Interim Prime Minister Ilie Bolojan took charge of the operational side, requesting from NATO the urgent deployment of military equipment to detect low-altitude drones. Romania pressed the button to manage this crisis, and the speed of that button press was the fastest response from a NATO country since the start of the war. Romania's diplomatic response was harsh, but there's an even heavier card on the table: NATO's Article 4. Foreign Minister Oana Silvia Toju spoke clearly after the Galata incident. Last night's event is an incident that justifies Article 4. This article is NATO's collective consultation mechanism. If any member country believes its territorial integrity or security is under threat, it can request formal consultations with its allies. It does not require the use of military force, but its diplomatic weight is significant because it brings the entire alliance to the table. No formal decision has been made yet, but the card's presence on the table has been declared. This card has been used before, and its results were concrete. In September 2025, Poland activated Article 4 after 19 Russian drones entered its airspace. That night marked a first in NATO history. Alliance aircraft fired at enemy targets in Allied airspace for the first time. Polish F-16s, Dutch F-35s, and Italian AWACS aircraft responded together, and at least 3 drones were shot down. Polish Prime Minister Tusk told Parliament it was the closest they had been to open conflict since World War II. The concrete outcome of Article 4, additional Patriot batteries were deployed to Poland. Airspace restrictions were imposed along the eastern border, and Operation Eastern Sentry was launched. In other words, Article 4 is not just a consultation. Concrete military steps follow. Romania's situation is different from Poland's, but in one respect, more severe. In Poland, 19 drones entered, but there were no civilian injuries and only 1 house was damaged. In Romania, a single drone entered, but struck an apartment building directly, and 2 civilians were injured, one of them a 14-year-old child. And this was not an isolated incident, it was the 28th violation. Considering that Poland activated Article 4 with 19 violations in a single night, Romania's case with 28 violations and civilian injuries stands on diplomatically much stronger ground for the same step. Quick side note, you're watching the Military Report, and if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. Article 5, Collective Defense, is a different threshold. It has been activated only once in NATO history, September 11, 2001. Activation requires the definition of an armed attack, and a single drone incident does not yet meet that threshold, but the escalation ladder is climbing step by step. In 2023, drone debris was found and NATO said there was no evidence of intentional attack. In 2025, Poland shot down drones and Article 4 was activated. In 2026, civilians were injured in Romania and a consulate was closed, each step higher than the last. And at each step, Russia's accident defense grows a little weaker. Romania has not yet played the Article 4 card, but the Allies' response came even without playing it. NATO's response came quickly and institutionally. Secretary-General Mark Rutte delivered a message of absolute solidarity with Romania and reiterated that the alliance is ready to defend every square centimeter of Allied territory. US Ambassador to NATO Matthew Whitaker called the incident a reckless incursion. NATO spokesman Alison Garr went beyond condemnation, stating that potential additional defensive measures are being considered. This last detail matters. NATO was now signaling not just rhetoric, but operational steps. Beyond NATO, Europe delivered its own response. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said Russia's war of aggression had crossed yet another line, and announced the preparation of the 21st sanctions package, a package that had not been on the agenda before the drone incident. France took direct action, summoning the Russian ambassador to the foreign ministry and condemning the incident as an extremely irresponsible act threatening regional security. France's move is significant on its own because French troops are stationed in Romania. This attack indirectly threatened French personnel as well. Ukrainian President Zelensky said, "We are ready to support Romania in whatever way is necessary." Amid this wave of international reaction, the Kremlin's position was becoming increasingly isolated. Spokesman Peskov said Putin had been informed of the incident, but did not confirm whether the drone belonged to Russia. Romania had disclosed the trajectory, route, drone model, and origin. While the Kremlin continued to refuse to claim ownership, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zakharova threatened a swift response to the consulate closure. The side that dropped a drone on a NATO country's apartment building was issuing retaliation threats. Romania put the evidence on the table. NATO and the EU announced support in turn, and the Kremlin had no card left but denial. Diplomatic response and allied solidarity matter, but Romania's real strength lies in the military transformation behind them. When Russia invaded Ukraine, Romania was one of the weakest links on NATO's eastern flank, a 650 kilometers border with Ukraine, a Black Sea coastline, ports within Russia's range, but an army lacking the modern capacity to defend them. In 2022, Romania was still conducting air patrols with Cold War-era MiG-21 fighter jets, an army trying to counter 2020's threats with 1960s technology. 3 years later, the picture has completely changed. The MiG-21s were retired and replaced by F-16 Fighting Falcons acquired from Portugal and Norway. By 2026, the fleet has reached 49 aircraft, and with 18 additional F-16s coming from the Netherlands, it is expected to grow to 66 to 67 modern fighter jets by year's end. The F-16s that scrambled on the night the drone fell on Galati were part of this fleet. Pilots had been authorized to fire but the 4-minute window was not enough to engage. Romania is moving precisely to close this gap because F-16s can counter high-altitude threats. But stopping drones gliding at low altitude like the one in Galați requires a different architecture, and Romania is building exactly that. Air defense has been restructured into a layered system. At the top, 4 Patriot PAC-3 Plus batteries counter ballistic missiles and high-altitude threats, with 4 more to be delivered by 2027. Below them, 231 Mistral launchers and 934 missiles from France, along with South Korea's Chiron short-range systems, cover the medium and low altitude. And the most critical layer, drone versus drone. Marop's drone interceptors developed by former Google CEO Eric Schmidt's company Project Eagle were tested in Romania during a NATO exercise in April 2026. Attended by more than 400 troops and defense industry manufacturers, these systems were tested against maritime drone threats, and the defense minister said they would be operational within days. Had the Galați drone come 1 month earlier, Marop's would already have been in service. The transformation extends beyond air defense. In ground forces, Soviet-era tanks are being replaced by M1A2 SEPV-3 Abrams, and HIMARS rocket systems have the capacity to strike targets in the Black Sea with a 300 kilometers range. But perhaps the most strategic step is Romania building its own drone capacity. 18 Bayraktar TB2s have been delivered. A joint drone production agreement was signed with Ukraine, and a separate drone production and testing mechanism was established with the United States and the United Kingdom. Romania is no longer just a country protected from drones, it is becoming a country that produces drones. The financial scale of this entire transformation had been finalized just 1 week before the drone incident. On May 21st, the European Commission approved 16.68 billion euros in defense financing for Romania under the SAFE program, one of the largest defense packages ever granted to a single country by Europe. 15 separate programs, mechanized warfare modernization, layered air defense, Black Sea naval reinforcement, helicopter fleet renewal, and defense industry localization. 1 week later, a Russian drone fell on that country's apartment building, and why SAFE was approved became understood by everyone overnight. There is a reason Romania is arming itself this fast and why this drone incident resonated so widely. The reason is the same geography. Romania shares a 650 kilometers border with Ukraine, and the Danube River forms most of that border. Russia's drone attacks target the port of Izmail on the opposite bank of that river, meaning every attack wave passes right by Romania's doorstep. It has a coastline on the Black Sea standing directly across from Russia's Black Sea Fleet. Romania is not just a NATO member, it is the geographic lock of NATO's southeastern flank, and critical strategic assets sit atop that lock. At Decisively military base in southern Romania, NATO's ballistic missile defense shield is stationed, the Aegis, a shore system capable of destroying medium-range ballistic missiles in flight with SM-3 interceptors. This system is one of the cornerstones of Europe's missile shield. Russia has viewed this shield as a direct threat for years and has demanded its removal, but Decisively remains operational. Mihail Koganitianu near Constanța is being transformed into NATO's largest base in Europe with a $2.7 billion expansion project, with approximately 3,500 Allied troops permanently stationed there. And with the newly launched LTUM program, a pre-positioned material logistics complex, the United States is turning this base into a forward depot. Any attack on this base would directly involve US personnel, triggering a bilateral response without even requiring NATO consensus. But Romania's strategic role is not limited to defense. It is also the southern gateway for weapons flowing to Ukraine. In January 2026, NATO opened its second major arms supply and coordination hub in Romania, working in parallel with the Rzeszów hub in Poland, creating a southern route for the Donbass and southern front. In 2025, 220,000 tons of military aid were delivered to Ukraine through NATO logistic structures, 9,000 trucks, 1,800 rail cars, and 500 strategic airlift flights. The port of Constanța and the Danube corridor have transported more than 193 million tons of goods under EU solidarity lanes, sustaining both Ukrainian exports and the NATO supply chain. The drone that fell on Galați fell into this picture. It didn't just hit an apartment building. It hit the soil of a country an hour from NATO's missile shield, neighbor to Europe's largest military base, and home to the southern gateway of the weapons flow to Ukraine. The drone itself was a cheap Iranian copy, but where it fell is one of the world's most sensitive strategic regions. At this point, we need to look at the other side of the picture as well. Russia has arguments. A route deviation by one drone out of a 43-drone swarm is technically possible, GPS drift or a navigation error. From the Kremlin's perspective, Romania is not neutral. It hosts the southern gateway of the weapons flow to Ukraine, trains Ukrainian pilots on F-16s, and stations NATO's largest base on its territory. And cost asymmetry favors Russia. Spending a $4 million missile to stop a $50,000 drone is not sustainable. Romania's own Brigadier General Maxim also acknowledges this was not a deliberate attack. We are not under attack. We are facing the effects of a conflict taking place right next to our border. But an accident happens once. The American Stephen Evelyn, living in Galati, sums it up in one sentence: "This has happened 28 times. I don't believe the Russians are doing this by accident, or they're highly incompetent at waging war." And the cost asymmetry is getting an answer too. Romania is planning to reverse the equation not with $4 million missiles, but with cheap drone hunters like Marops. Moreover, the picture will be very different next time. Just 10 days before Galati, Romania signed a law allowing the shoot-down of drones entering its airspace without authorization. The law was made for exactly this scenario. But in the first real test, the 4-minute window was not enough to engage. When the layered defense is completed, that window will close. Putin tried the same tactic again, but this tactic is now working against Russia. Every drone violation accelerates Romania's armament and narrows the Kremlin's diplomatic space. Russia dropped a drone on an apartment building. In return, it lost its consulate, its intelligence eye, and a piece of its diplomatic legitimacy, and the next drone will be shot down. Make sure to subscribe to the Military Report for more breaking Russia-Ukraine war news, insights, and analysis. Thank you for watching.